Welcome back to the Riichi Mahjong guide. In this video, we're going to be talking about some of the more common optional rules that can be used in Riichi Mahjong. The first one we'll discuss is the inclusion of akadora, or red dora. As you can see, these tiles are completely red, and they also have a little gem for players who might be colorblind. And these tiles, when included, are treated as dora no matter what. So these red dora replace 1 5 from each suit. So each suit would have 3 normal 5s and 1 red 5, like this. In Saki, they even use 2 red 5-pin for some reason. And most Japanese Mahjong sets will come with a set of 4 red dora like this. But generally, when red dora are used, it would just be 1 of each, as opposed to having 2 of the red 5-pin. And the inclusion of red dora generally increases the value of hands because there's more dora flying around, of course. The next optional rule we're going to talk about is kuikai, or swap calling. This rule refers to whether or not you are allowed to discard the same tile on which you called immediately after that call. So for instance, if you have a sequence here, a 4 5 6-pin sequence, and someone discards the red 5-pin. Naturally, if it's allowed, you would want to say chi, using these to add that dora to your hand, and then discard your normal 5-pin. If kuikai is allowed, then that's fine, but in most cases, kuikai is not allowed, and therefore you are not allowed to discard the same tile that you called. You're also not allowed to discard the tile that completes the other side of the sequence for which you called. So for instance, if someone discards the 7-pin here, and you call chi, if kuikai is allowed, then you can discard this 4-pin no problem, but if it's not allowed, then you cannot discard the 4-pin. As you might expect, it's the same thing for poems. So if you have a concealed triplet of, in this case it's the 7-so, someone discards the last 7-so, if you call poem, if kuikai is allowed, then you can discard that last 7-so. But if it is not allowed, then you cannot discard that last 7-so. So you might be wondering what the point of this rule is. I guess it's so you can't just call to guarantee safe tiles. For instance, after someone declares Riichi, let's say the player to your left discards the 7-so. The person who declared Riichi didn't declare Don, so you know that that 7-so is safe, but you don't want to break up your entire triplet of 7-so. So in order to get yourself safely through the turn, you might call Pon and then discard the last one, knowing that it's safe. So that's why kuikai is generally not allowed. So just make sure you know whether or not it's allowed before you try it. The next set of optional rules we're going to cover are called tochu ryukyoku, which is usually translated to abortive draw. Unlike normal ryukyoku, which are exhaustive draws, tochu ryukyoku can occur when certain conditions are met, and it causes the current game to end, and it is redealt with 1 additional honba and all Riichi sticks staying on the table. There's 4 common ones, and the first one we're going to discuss is Sufon Denda. This occurs when, on the first 4 discards, each player discards the same win tile. So for example here, the player who is east discards a west, then the player who is south discards the same win. Now it's your turn as west. 2 wests are already gone, so what are you going to do with this one, right? So you discard it, and then the player who's north takes a turn. And if they discard their west, then the game immediately ends and is redealt with 1 additional honba. This is mandatory if this situation happens, but of course all the players have a hand in it. If the player who is east just doesn't discard a win tile, this can't occur. And then if all the following players don't discard the same win tile that east discards, then it won't occur. So although it's mandatory, it's more like a draw is agreed upon by all the players because of how it works. The next abortive draw we're going to cover is Kyushu Kyuhai. On the first uninterrupted round of turns, a player may reveal 9 different terminals and honor tiles from their hand, and that causes an abortive draw. For instance here, the player who is north can just reveal 9 different terminals and honors, including the tile they drew, if it applies, and that causes an abortive draw. This one is optional, of course, because you don't have to reveal the 9 different terminals and honors in your hand. You could just go for Kokushimuso or something like that, if you would rather do that. The next 2 abortive draws are much less common, so I'm just going to briefly mention them. The first is Su Kai Kan. That's if 4 cons are made, unless they're made by the same person. If they're made by the same person, then they can get the Yakuman Su Kansu. But if 4 cons were made in total by 2 or more players, that could be counted as an abortive draw. Sometimes the game is drawn as soon as the con is declared, unless someone declares Don for Chankan. Sometimes it's after the player who made the 4th con draws a Vinshan tile and discards it. Of course, if they win on the Vinshan draw, or someone wins on the tile they discard, then the win is counted normally. But if none of those things happen, then it could be considered an abortive draw. This one is much less common. In some rule sets, after 4 cons are made, no more cons can be made by anyone at all, and it does not cause an abortive draw. And the last one I will mention in this video is Su-cha Riichi, which occurs when all 4 players declare Riichi. For this one, after the 4th player declares Riichi, if no one wins on that tile that they discard, then the game can be considered an abortive draw, and everyone has to reveal their hands to show that they were actually in Tenpai, just like with a normal Ryu Kyoku. And like I mentioned, the Riichi sticks stay on the table, so the value of the next hand is increased considerably. The next optional rule is actually an optional Yaku. And this is a special Yaku because it has nothing to do with the contents of your hand. It has to do with the contents of your discard pile. So if you notice the player to our right, their discard pile is composed entirely of terminals and honors. If when the wall is exhausted and a Ryu Kyoku occurs, if a player's discard pile is entirely terminal tiles and honor tiles, and none of their tiles have been called by other players, they are awarded the Yaku Nagashi Mangan, which, as you might guess, is worth a Mangan. Some rules have this counting as the player winning by Tsumo. Some rules have this just replacing the no-ten payment, so it doesn't count as a win. And then the player who was East, if they were in Tenpai, they get a Denchan, like normal. This Yaku is very difficult to get, and it's not very common, so you just have to check the rules by which you play regarding Nagashi Mangan. The next thing we're going to talk about is how multiple Don declarations are handled. In some rule sets, only one player can win the hand, but in other rule sets, 2 or even 3 players are allowed to win at the same time. So for instance, we're down to the end of the game, and it's East's turn to draw. So now the player across from us, East, has just discarded the 8-pin, and right now we are in Tenpai for Sanshoku. So we open our hand and declare Don. But the player to our left is also in Tenpai, waiting on that same 8-pin, and they also declare Don. So what happens here depends on the rules. If only one player is allowed to win, then the player who is next in turn order gets to claim the win, and this is called Atama Hane, or head bump. So in that case, the player to our left, because they were before us in player order, they get to claim the win, and we get nothing. However, in some rule sets, double Don is allowed, where 2 players are allowed to win on the same discard. In that case, the player who dealt in would have to pay the full value for both players' hands, and depending on the rules, the Riichi sticks and Honba that are on the table usually only apply to the next player in turn order, so that would be the player to our left, and we wouldn't get any of those bonuses, but we still got to win the hand at least. And in some rule sets, even 3 players are allowed to win on the same discarded tile, but in other rule sets, that is not the case. If double Don is allowed but triple Don is not, and all 3 other players try to declare Don on the same discard, then that results in an abortive draw. It really just depends on the rules by which you play. For instance, the World Riichi Championship used Atamahane, but the EMA or European Mahjong Association uses multiple don. So you just have to check the rules by which you play. And the last thing we're going to cover in this video is an optional rule called Yanhan Shibari. That's a 2-han limitation, and this is usually applied when there are 5 or more honba on the board. The idea behind this rule is to prevent the player who is East from easily getting more Then-chan. And how this rule works is that the han value of your yaku must be at least 2 instead of just 1. So you can't have like Tanya 1 Dora because Dora is not yaku. But you could have the hand we have right now, which is a closed Sanshoku worth 2 han. Or you could have 2 separate yaku that are worth 1 han each, like Tanyao and Pinhu. That would qualify for the 2 han limitation enacted by Yanhan Shibari. This rule, I don't know if it's more common one way or the other. It usually doesn't get to 5 honba, so it's not something most people really worry about. But it's better to know so that you don't accidentally try and win a 1 han hand when there are 5 or more honba and you get like a chombo or something. So in this situation, if East discards that same 8-pin, the player to our left, who is in Tenpai for Tanyao only, they cannot win their hand, but we can win our hand because it's the 2-han yaku Sanshoku Dojun. So even if Atamahane were in effect right now, if Yanhan Shibari was also in effect, we would win the hand, but the player to our left could not declare a win because they don't have enough han from their yaku. So in this video, we covered several of the more common optional rules that are used in Riichi Mahjong. So as usual, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below, and thank you for watching.